Benbow kids.
Which Benbow kids?
All 4 of them.
Chill, baby. You know I don't like you to fight.
Well, it was a matter of family honor. They said you were a moral leper.
What?
A witted sepulcher.
Huh?
So I piled into them. What do those words mean?
Never mind. They must have heard their folks saying them.
Anyway, they licked me. I guess I didn't uphold the family honor too good. Daddy?
Yes, baby.
Are you sorry you don't have a whole bunch of children instead of only just me?
Come here to me, Jill. Jill, honey, did I ever tell you about the time that all the beasts of the forest were boasting about how many offspring they had?
Uh-uh.
Well, the rabbits were the most uppity, because they had dozens, you know. And the pigs were sort of snooty, too. They had whole litters at a time. Then they finally asked Mrs. Lion how many she had. And she said, only one. But that one is a lion. Understand, baby?
Oh, Daddy, you're so beautiful.
You are listening to Rogers of the Gazette, starring Mr. Will Rogers, Jr. Tomorrow night, on most of these same stations, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Colman, one of Hollywood's foremost couples, inaugurate the new Thursday Theater series for CBS Radio with an adaptation of the James Hilton novel Random Harvest. Don't forget, tomorrow night on CBS Radio. And now we continue with the second act of tonight's show.
Finished?
Not yet.
Time's getting short. It's past 3. Have to be finished by 10.
That's the trouble with time, Maggie. It's like a good cigar. Always too short.
Will, you been foreclosed yet?
Not yet, Doc. She hasn't sent word.
You decided what you're going to do?
Yep. I'm going to finish the article on Lance O'Neill and put the paper to bed.
Against Mrs. Hannibal and the League?
No, Doc. For Lance O'Neill. He just painted. He never heard of the Civic League.
Good boy. Oh, say, I dug around the house among some of his old things. Here's some ammunition you might use. Lance O'Neill's diary. Catch.
Thanks, Doc.
I got a call to make, or I'd stay and see the fun. Oh, look up his entry for June 2nd, 1909. I think you'll find it interesting. Good night, you two.
Maggie, will you make up a small notice to the effect that after this issue, the paper is no longer in my hands?
Will, you still have over a column to fill. What about the county agent's crop report?
No, I think I'll just enlarge the O'Neill article. Maybe something in this diary. What was the date Doc mentioned?
1909, June 2nd.
April, May. Here it is. This day I went into the field with my darling and... Maggie! O'Neill used a real live model for that painting in Huckabee's.
So?
Clara Chase.
Never heard of her. Who was she?
The girl who later married Fenimore Hannibal.
Mrs. Hannibal?
Yes.
Let me see. Made sketches for the portrait all this noon. How Rubens would have loved flesh tones like my Clara's, reclined beneath apple tree. Low-hanging branch, perfect composition. Well, it's Mrs. Hannibal who's been on display at Huckabee's all these years. Mrs. Hannibal?
That's what the man says.
Oh, wait till the town reads it. We better run off a couple 100 copies extra, huh?
Maggie, you advise me to print it? It could hurt her real bad.
She's hurting you real bad. Will, you haven't any doubts about using it, have you?
Yes, I have doubts.
Well, you better clear 'em up real fast then. That press has to start rolling in 20 minutes. tired.
What time is it?
Okay, is it after 10?
We missed the band concert.
Don't we always on the night we have to put her away?
Seems. Now that the paper's gone to press, Maggie, do you think I did the right thing?
You never did a righter thing, Will. Uh-oh.
What?
Crossing the square.
Huh? Charlie Vernier. I forgot. The bank said he was coming over on legal business.
Good evening, Maggie. Will?
Hi.
Why, Charlie, what are you doing all by yourself? You slipped your leash?
I was instructed to meet Mrs. Hannibal here this evening.
I suppose it's about taking over the mortgage.
It is.
This all pleases you a great deal, doesn't it, Charlie Vernier?
Oh, Maggie, I didn't mean that...
Well, Charles, did you tell them?
Not yet, Mrs. Hannibal. I thought perhaps you...
Mr. Rogers, I think you've already been informed that I now hold the mortgage on this property.
I know.
And I believe you've made a request for an extension of time in which to pay your note. That request is denied. Can you pay the note now?
No, I can't, Mrs. Hannibal.
Then I foreclose.
I see.
However, I'm told you're a fairly capable young man, and if we can agree as to salary and other things, you may remain editor. I plan no great changes, just a slightly different emphasis in policy. To begin with, all advertising contracts with Bert Huckabee are hereby suspended.
Go on.
And, of course, the article on Lance O'Neill himself will not appear at all.
Well, now, that's a little impossible, Mrs. Hannibal.
Careful, Will.
Mr. Rogers, this is my paper now. I'll run it as I see fit.
Too late. This week's issue's already gone to press.
I see. And it contains the article that the League so strongly opposed?
I'm afraid so, Mrs. Hannibal.
You're fired. Tell him he's fired, Charles.
You're through, Will.
Now, wait a minute, Charlie. Mrs. Hannibal. You're both a little whopper-jawed.
What?
My note doesn't fall due until tomorrow. Until then, I own this property and I run this newspaper. I used an extra column for that article on Lance O'Neill, Mrs. Hannibal, because I ran across some extra material. Here.
What's that?
It's Lance O'Neill's personal diary, Mrs. Hannibal.
Personal diary.
Very personal diary. For the year 1909.
Let me see a copy of that paper.
Won't be off the press for another hour. You can see it then.
Is there any way to stop it, Charles?
Well, I can try, Mrs. Hannibal. Maybe I can get Judge Myers out of bed and have him issue a court order.
Get busy. Go and do it right now.
Yes, Mrs. Hannibal, right away.
It'll take a better lawyer than Charlie, and a lot different laws than we got right now, to stop any paper in this country from being printed, Mrs. Hannibal. But I'll tell you what. Most of the material in my article came from that diary. Now, you can take it with you and look at it if you want.
Oh.
Night, Mrs. Hannibal.
Oh, Will. She took that part pretty hard.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering how she'll take the rest of it.
Hello, Daddy. What's wrong?
Hate to wake you up, honey, but I've got something I want to talk over with you.
Well, sure, Daddy.
Jill, a few years ago, when I came here with your mother, you were just a little girl then, I said to myself that this was the place for me. The place. I thought that here's where I'd find the birds and the bees and the cigarette trees and the lemonade springs where the bluebirds sing and the big rock candy mountains. I guess maybe I didn't do so well.
What do you mean, Daddy?
What would you say if we didn't live here anymore?
Don't you like it here anymore, Daddy?
Oh, I like it fine, Jill. But there's something else. Jill, if somebody wanted to take something you loved away from you, and you suddenly found out that you could take something away from them that was pretty important to them, what would you do?
I tried to do what was right, Daddy.
Sometimes it's pretty hard to tell right from wrong.
Like an apple?
Huh?
Well, sometimes an apple's ripe, but then sometimes it's rotten, and you can't tell the difference until you bite into it.
Well, that's about it. Stay here a minute, baby. I'll see who it is.
All right, Daddy.
Well, hello.
I'm sorry to be calling so late, Mr. Rogers, but I saw a light and I wanted to talk to you.
Come in, Mrs. Hannibal.
No. Oh, I'd rather stand here in the dark. Mr. Rogers, I've read this diary.
Yes, ma'am.
I came to tell you that I'm glad you wrote an article on Lance. He was a wonderful and creative man that anybody could be proud of. Particularly a woman he loved that didn't deserve any part of his love.
Now.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers. I suppose I wanted you not to write the article because I was afraid you'd somehow connect me with him and it would ruin me here, make me a laughingstock. But now that doesn't seem to matter much. It's funny finding you were really loved by a man who's been dead 20 years. Well, I don't have to go into that.
No, ma'am.
Well, I came to tell you something else, Mr. Rogers. First thing in the morning, I'm selling the mortgage back to the bank and recommending they give you a 90-day extension on your note.
Well, now that's mighty decent of you.
And I want to thank you for letting me see this diary.
Why don't you keep it?
I will. Always. Well, I don't suppose I'll be seeing you ever again. I think I'll be leaving town very shortly, since it'd be impossible to live here after the truth is out. I'm not ashamed of it, but acting as I have, I'm just...
Wait a minute, Mrs. Hannibal. Here's a copy of the paper. They just began running them off when I left the office.
Oh.
It wouldn't have served any public interest to tell folks about you and Lance, or how you posed for him now and then. I thought that what was in that diary sort of belonged to you and him, nobody else. So you won't find your name in the paper, Mrs. Hannibal, anywhere.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Rogers. Good night.
Daddy,
Yeah, baby.
how was the apple?
I'm just beginning to taste it now. Nice and ripe, and not a bit rotten. Come on, baby, it's bedtime.
You have just heard Rogers of the Gazette, starring Mr. Will Rogers, Jr., with Georgia Ellis as Maggie Button. Tonight's story was written by Walter Brown Newman and E. Jack Newman and is produced and transcribed by Norman McDonald. Featured in the cast were Parley Bayer as Doc and Mary McGovern as Jill, with Howard McNear, Byron Kane, and John Daner. The special music was composed and conducted by Wilbur Hatch. Bob Lamont speaking. And remember, Thursday nights enjoy thrilling dramas of romance presented on the CBS Radio Network.